Hi guys, I'm Amber, this is Amber Online, and this week we're going to be discussing Dennis Villeneuve's new film Enemy starring Jake Gyllenhaal. So Enemy is a small film shot in Toronto, Toronto is actually called Toronto instead of called New York, and the essential premise is that a man's co-worker recommends a film to him, and he notices there's a man in the film that looks exactly like him. He tracks him down, finds out he's his duplicate, and a whole bunch of chaos ensues as they sort of try to resolve this situation of being each other's duplicates. So, on the surface, it seems like a very basic science fiction-y kind of plot, like, oh, what would you do if you were cloned or you were doubled, and how would you cope? But this movie is really, really a thinker movie, and I think about the thinker, that a lot of this has to do with the fact that the director's choices made this a very sort of obfuscated plot. Like, you don't know exactly what's happening, you don't know exactly why he's been doubled, even at the end, and you're sort of left to draw your own conclusions. And I think that was the intent of the director in this film, because he didn't want to insert his own authorial intent into it. He wanted people to be able to think about it and interpret it themselves, and indeed many reviews have suggested that you go and see this with someone else so you can break it down with them after you watch the film, and you're not just thinking about it on your own afterwards. It is a very well shot film. The scenes sort of have this amber tone over them, so it's very grimy and very gritty looking, and the characters are sort of sad and flawed, adding to that. The beginning of the movie establishes a lot of the themes of the film very overtly, so it's almost telling you, this is what I want you to think about, and this is what I want you to try and apply to the film. The opening sequence, the character is in a sex club in which these women come out with a tarantula, and they may or may not squish the tarantula. There's a lot of slow shots showing detail that allow you to remember that detail for later in the film. The shoes, the tarantula, the atmosphere of the club is all sort of very dark and creepy. So they establish this sort of grimy sex club that seems like there's a secret key to get in. It seems like a little mystical, a little dark, a little cloak and dagger. Everyone's very serious. It's not a very exciting atmosphere for a sex club, but it is there nonetheless. And then you switch over to the atom aspects. I'm going to call them aspects of the duality of the double personality. So the Adam aspect of the personality is a professor at a campus, which is York, because I totally recognized it, I went there, teaching about dictatorships. So he's making these very obvious statements about dictatorships that it's very clear that the director wants you to apply these statements to the movie. So he's talking about how certain dictatorships used entertainment to keep control. They gave them the Colosseums, they gave them food, they kept them complacent. Other dictatorships use control, and they use harsher means, and they take away culture, they take away individual thought, they lower education, so that you can't think and you can't have independent ideas. Furthermore, during this time, they're sort of showing the patterns that they apply, how dictatorships control people, and at the same moment, they're showing the repetitious pattern of Adam's life, that he goes and he teaches this lecture, and he only has a set of lectures that he teaches, so that's repetitious, and he goes home every night to his sad apartment, and he has sex with his girlfriend, and he does this over and over again. And the pattern is then broken when his colleague suggests he watches this film, and he says he's not very into films, very into movies, and his colleague's like, well, give it a try and watch it. And then, of course, he sees his double in the film and becomes obsessed with finding him. So the thing I'm calling aspects of the personality, I think, are sort of the crux of the film, and you really should see this film. It's going to be a spoilerific review, so if you don't want it spoiled, you should watch it, and also, if you want to understand what I'm talking about, you should watch it, because I can't break down all the plot points, right? That would just be really boring. But in my view, there are two aspects of the same person here, and I think the director makes it very obvious that it is one person. It's not a twin or a clone or a body snatch, and the question becomes more rather, is he schizophrenic, and are we watching one man who's just like had a mental break and he doesn't know which person he is, and the timelines are screwed up because we're seeing it from his perspective? Or is it the instance where they've been separated? I think they've actually been separated. I don't know if it was some sort of mystical ritual that took place at the creepy sex club. I don't know if it was just something that happened to him as with, like any body swap movie or something, like, oh, something magic happened because it needed to happen. But to me, it seems that he's been fractured into two distinct personalities, the Adam side and the Anthony side. So the Adam side is the professor. He lives in a crappy apartment. He has a girlfriend that is is this weird, strained relationship with her, and they don't really show any interaction with them beyond them having sex and a few words exchanged. And at one point, she's gone to bed and she's asleep, and he tries to like force himself on her, and she gets mad at him. So there's almost like he's got this rapey vibe going on with him now. So he's not set up to be an incredibly nice person. He's very self-serving still. He's in this simple pattern, and he's beaten down, and he's just about serving himself. And then on the other hand, you have the Anthony character, who's the character that appears in the film. So he's an aspiring actor. He's been in a few crappy roles, but yet when you see his life, he lives in this gorgeous apartment. He in fact comments on the fact that the Adam aspect lives in a crappy apartment. When he sees his apartment, he has this beautiful wife, and she's pregnant. So at the introduction, when Adam is trying to contact Anthony, so I'm going to call him Professor Actor because they're both A names, and I'm going to screw him up at some point. And you're going to be like, hey, wasn't that this guy? So Professor Aspect tries to contact Actor Aspect initially, and the first thing he does is he calls his home and he gets his wife instead of him, and his wife mistakes him for Actor Aspect and is talking to him like he's the Actor Aspect, and then later he calls back and he gets the Actor Aspect, and the Actor Aspect tells his wife, he's like, no, it was just that guy that called before, that weirdo that says we look alike. And she is immediately upset because she's like, are you seeing her again?
Who was on the phone?
The same guy who called before. Same guy.
Are you lying to me?
So we know that he's been unfaithful to his wife in the past. While this is going on, Actor Aspect also goes and sees his mother, and his mother sort of solidifies the idea that they're one person, because Actor Aspect, we have a whole scene where he's talking about how he likes blueberries. His mother serves Professor Aspect blueberries, and he's like, I don't like blueberries. And also his mother says to him, you have a good job, you should give up this actor fantasy, and she also mentions that he has a hard time staying with one woman. So my conclusion from this is then that this personality has fractured, and I keep interlacing my fingers because it's like overlapping traits. It was not necessarily a black and white, good and bad fracture, but rather a different parts of his personality fractured along a cracked line, and, blueberry loving is over here, as is acting, as is the wife, and then blueberry hating and professorship and mistress are over here. So I think that the woman he saw was his mistress, and the woman that he's with now is his wife. This is Professor Hand and Actor Hand. I think I can establish that. So we have this idea then that he's been fractured, and he's two personalities, and throughout the film we also have this spider motif that came up initially at the sex club, and I understand that is not present in the novel that this is based on, though I have not read that novel, but I believe the internet when it says that, because why would the internet lie to me? So they have this spider motif, and they have nightmares about, it's unclear which piece of the personality is having nightmares about it, but they have nightmares about a giant spider walking over the city, about a woman with a spider head. So the idea of women and spiders it's very entwined in this film, because it was with the sex club at the beginning, the women and the spiders, and then later in the film you have the woman with a spider head, so they're sort of aspects of the same thing, which is what led me initially to think it might have been some sort of mystical ritual that happened at the sex club that changed him over. There's also this idea that's brought up as one of the themes through his professorship that chaos and order are important. So the film actually begins with a quote about chaos being order yet on something. Basically, chaos is order yet ununderstood, but I don't remember the actual word to make it a good quote. And then later in the film, when he's standing in his classroom, there's a whole bunch of chaos and order written all over the board, just over and over again. And apparently there's a pattern, but it was ultimately a gibberishy pattern just to show you chaos and order lots and lots of times. So it's about this chaotic film being ordered in our minds as we're the viewers, and as we overcome the dictatorship that has repressed our education, and we take on culture and creativity and education, and we try to figure this out. I think that's one of the themes of the film, that we are the audience being incorporated as a piece of the art and overcoming the restrictive dictatorship in which we live in our own lives, that we're complacent with our entertainment and our media and our foods and our nice things and our first world amenities, and we're overcoming this idea. So that sort of takes care of that theme. We have his split personality theme, that I think he's one person that's been split into two aspects, and the people around him don't necessarily recognize that the other aspect of him is missing. So perhaps the wife always knew he's an actor, but to him he's only the actor, because at a certain point when Professor Aspect calls the wife of Actor Aspect and says, you know, I want to talk to him, and then he calls back and talks to Actor Aspect. Actor Aspect seems to only know he's an actor. He doesn't know he's ever been a professor. And when he says to his wife he's a fan, he wanted to meet up with me, she laughs at him and thinks it's ridiculous, because he's only been in like 3 walk-on roles. And so she can't imagine someone being a fan of his, but he, in his mind, has only ever been an actor. So I suppose to him it would make sense. And Professor Aspect, when his mother says to him at lunch, you need to give up this silly acting aspiration, seems surprised, because he's never been an actor to his mind, and in fact he doesn't like film at all. He doesn't really engage in entertainment, because he's not being entertained by the dictatorship. He's supposed to be the educated aspect, as it were, I suppose. But as the film progresses, you find out like more and more about them. They meet up. They both have a scar, so it's not like they're twins, separated at birth. The mother says, I'm your only mother, and you're my only son.
You are my only son? I am your only mother.
So you know that they're not twins, they're not brothers, they're not clones, because they both have scars, and you know, if you like science fiction, clone theory would suggest that, you know, they're only ever differentiated by like a scar, because they're switched by the aspects of what happened to them as opposed to their DNA. So this progresses. He finds that Professor Aspect has a picture that's the same as a picture that Actor Aspect has. So there's almost this idea then to me that he has this nice apartment and this nice life with his wife before the fracture, and he also has this really crappy rundown apartment that he keeps for his mistress, and that's where he goes and has his affair. Because if he's a successful university professor, as it's suggested, and his mom says you have a respectable job, he'd be able to afford more than a terrible little apartment. But as an actor who's only had 3-bit parts in his entire life for the last 10 years, he wouldn't be able to afford a really nice apartment, and there's no suggestion that either the wife or the girlfriend have jobs that are supporting these lifestyles. They may, but again, I think it's important to note that there's no suggestion of that, so we have to understand that as a successful professor who's not shown to have like a drug habit or a gambling addiction or something, it's likely that the Professor Aspect is paying for his nice apartment and also keeping this apartment on the side for the mistress, and they just sort of happen to fracture incongruent with their professions, if that makes sense. The person paying for the nice apartment is the professor, but the professor living in the crappy apartment with the mistress. So once they meet up, the Actor Aspect, which is more confident, more aggressive, more volatile, as compared to the Professor Aspect, who is more shy, more resident, more prone to being flustered, the Actor Aspect decides that the Professor Aspect must have slept with his wife, and he hatches this plan to take his girlfriend on a romantic weekend and seduce her, and then they'll be even. That's the idea. That he can be with both women and it'll be even. And Professor Aspect doesn't do anything to stop this. He doesn't fight it, because he's fearful and complacent, and he's not really a man. He's not really standing up and taking what is his. Not that women are objects and that she's his, but taking care of the woman that he apparently loves. So he allows this to go on, and while this is going on, he infiltrates the actor's apartment and goes and has a day with his wife, essentially. So he hasn't slept with his wife to this point, but he goes over to the apartment, and while he's there, he encounters I don't know if it's the super or the security desk guard, who mentions that he went to the sex club with him and that he really needs to go back. And I think this was a really interesting scene as well, because the security guard is talking to him as though he needs to get there, that this wasn't just like, it wasn't just a strip joint, it wasn't just a sex club, because I'm sure there are many sex clubs in Toronto that he could frequent if he wanted to, but he needs to get back to this one. So there's something special and unique about what happened at this place with the spiders and the women and the creepy, depressing vibe. So he gets up into the apartment, he's hesitant to sleep with the wife, but he's also shown as being much, much nicer to her. So she comes home and she's 6 months pregnant and he offers to do things for her, he's trying to take care of her, whereas actor aspect was always just sort of putting demands on her and saying, like, where are my blueberries? You know, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And there's sort of a suggestion that the wife may know that something's up. That it's not just, she does in fact meet both of them, and she sees that they look exactly the same, and she freaks out about it. Which initially when she was freaking out, I thought was like very weird. I'm like, okay, he looks like him, but there could still be the natural explanations of like twins separated at birth. Maybe he doesn't know he has a brother. Maybe it's just like coincidence, and he just looks a lot alike, and maybe you should see them side by side first. But she gets really upset about it. And when she's talking to her husband, she says, I think you know.
He looks exactly like you. What's happening?
I really don't know what you're talking about.
I think you know.
So there's some suggestion that she knows something is afoot right off the bat as soon as she sees the duplicate, but she seems afraid of it. But when the professor aspect is there with her, and he's talking to her, and he's being really nice to her, and she asks him to come to bed with her, and he sort of lays down with his clothes on. She's like, aren't you going to take your clothes off? And there seems to be this very obvious out-of-place thing happening there. And I would think, and though it's not overtly stated, that she knows that this is not the one who's her husband. She knows this is not the actor aspect because he's acting so differently, and especially after this has just happened, he's just discovered she has a duplicate. He has a duplicate, rather, that she would know that it's the duplicated personality. And he gets out of bed at one point, and he's crying because he doesn't know what he's doing there, and he doesn't want to sleep with this other guy's wife. He doesn't know what's happening with his life. It's all falling apart around him, and she gets out of bed, and she sort of comforts him, and then they have sex. And meanwhile, while this is happening, you have the duplicate aspect, the actor aspect at this seedy hotel with the girlfriend, and they're having like hot sex, and then she grabs his hand and she notices that he has a wedding ring imprint, which the professor aspect does not have because he's not married. But the actor aspect is, and he took off his ring and he has a wedding ring imprint. And she freaks out and she's like, who are you? Why are you doing this to me? She treats him like he's a monster, even though he keeps saying, calm down, no, I've always had that. And she acts like he's attacking her and that he's raping her because she doesn't know who he is now. She thought she was on this nice weekend with her boyfriend, and then she sees this ring imprint, and I don't know if it's a who are you, are you leading a double life, but she seems to indicate that he hasn't always had that ring imprint, and you don't get that after a day. And it's only been a day since she last saw him, so the suggestion is then that she knows he's something else as well, that these women are aware that there's something going on. And the girlfriend aspect has never met the duplicate. He's never mentioned it to her within scenes that we've seen. However, she still seems to know that something else is going on and he's the other aspect. They get into an argument. She says, you're not a man. And they have this huge fight. She keeps asking why you're doing this to me. She wants to go home. And he's like, doing what to you, doing what to you? And she seems to know that she's been also sort of abducted by this other personality. Interesting to note also, when they're showing the actor personality sort of stalking the girlfriend before he hatches his plan to take her away and get even by sleeping with her, he's following her on a streetcar where you have like this spiderweb motif of the wires up top, and they pan down to her shoes. Like he's sort of ogling her calves at the base of her skirt, and they pan down to her shoes, and she's wearing the same shoes that one of the women was wearing in the sex club, which it's obviously not coincidental. It's not like they couldn't afford another pair of shoes. So I don't know if she's supposed to be tied to this. I'm not sure exactly where she fits into this, but like the wife, she seems to know what is up, that there's something outside of a coincidence or something beyond what even the two personality aspects understand going on. So while the women are very much objects and commodities to be traded, that like you slept with my wife, so I'm going to sleep with your girlfriend, and then we're going to be even because they're not people, they're not personalities, and the actor aspect that left his wife and was unfaithful in the first place wants to get back with the mistress and sleep with her, whereas the professor aspect is probably the side of him that didn't want to cheat on his wife ever and really loves her and is expressing care for her. Both of these women seem to know something is up that the aspects don't know is up, and that could be because they're an incomplete person, they don't know what really went on, they have fractured memories of the event, but the fact that the women are interlaced with the spiders, and the spiders seem to be the jumping off point, because indeed that's the jumping off point they give us for the movie, the sex club with the women and the spiders. Maybe they're part of this whole scenario. I'm not going to talk to you about the last scene, because you really need to see the movie and see the last scene and draw your own conclusions about it. And if you see it and you want to ask me what I think about it, I would be more than happy to talk about it with you, but I don't want to do it here in the video and spoiler it. And I've already gone on for 20 minutes, so I'm going to cut it off here. But it's a really fascinating film. Did I enjoy it? I don't know. I don't know if I felt like I was entertained by the film itself, but I was super entertained by thinking about what was going on. It was very slow-paced, and I think it was sort of spoon-feeding you these ideas so that you would be able to pick them all up and think about it later. So as far as an exciting film, it was not an exciting film, but it was a very, very intriguing film, a very mood piece, something that sticks with you, particularly the last scene. You're sort of like, whoa, what's happening with that? It's a very creepy final scene, and it's only like a split second of this scene, and I think it's really, really interesting. You should definitely check this out. It's not playing in all theaters because it's a really little film, but if you can find a theater in your area that's playing it, definitely go and see it. Think about it. It's a fun movie to think about. If you enjoy reflecting on films, like, this is a lot of thinking on the surface, and you can just go deeper and deeper into the layers. It's super fun. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion of it. I hope it brought some things to light or gave you some more things to think about. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you're enjoying as this movie season kicks off this spring. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.